We've come down to St Albans, south of Luton, between Hemel Hempstead and Hatfield in Hertfordshire. It's market day. The entrance to the Abbey is down at the end of this street, and at the end of this street, let's have a look at this clock tower. Near here there used to be an Eleanor cross, the subject of a video still in production. So turn round now and go through that archway down towards the church. Yes, St Albans is a cathedral, but the natives, I understand, still call it St Albans Abbey, so I will. The building became a cathedral in 1877. Until 1539 it had been the church of a Benedictine abbey. We are now at the eastern end of the building. The abbey was dissolved in that year, and all the other buildings except the gateway, which we'll see later, have disappeared. At the end of the south transept here, a new chapter house has been built on the site of the original Norman chapter house. We've walked past the chapter house and are now looking at the south side of the building. After the Norman conquest, the old Saxon abbey was comprehensively rebuilt, completed in 1089. But in 1323, 3 bays on this south side collapsed and had to be rebuilt. That's from here to here. Then from here to the west end is an extension which had been built around 1200. It looks to me as though that little section has had to be rebuilt as well. I think these buttresses have been added later to hold the wall up. Just have a closer look at this wall while we're here. The only local building material available was flints of various sizes, and these are liberally interspersed with Roman tiles and bricks from the ruins of the Roman town Verulamium just down the hill. These white bits are traces of the old cloister which used to be here and which was demolished after the Dissolution. As you can see from this picture which hangs inside the church, the abbey covered quite a large area, and this church, big as it is, occupied just one small corner. The other thing remaining from the old abbey is, as we said, the gateway. And we're stood in front of that gateway now, looking towards the west end of the church. The gateway proved to be very handy for St Albans to use as a prison, and this probably saved it. The building is now part of St Albans School, which also has premises to the west. We'll now move behind the gatehouse. There are some more school buildings at the back of the gatehouse, and if you walk straight forward from here down that hill, you get to the site of Roman Verulamium, and so back to the church at its west end. After the Dissolution, the church building was bought by local people to become the parish church of St Albans, which it still is. You'll perhaps remember that in 1517 Martin Luther pinned an important notice to the church door in Wittenberg. The best we can do these days is to have a group of honourable comedians pass a law which requires St Albans Cathedral to pin this notice on its own front door. Anyway, Let's look at the cathedral. We're looking towards the east end. If we just hold it there for a minute, we can see at the far end on the left, that is the north side of the nave, the Romanesque Norman construction. Opposite this on the right, the south side, is the section which collapsed and was rebuilt in a later style. Now look behind you before we go any further. Remind us of that Roman town just down the hill where St Alban lived. And here is that picture of the old Abbey which we saw earlier. Now look, here is the abbot with a flock of new trainee monks. We'll let them get on and have a look at the north side here. And on the big square pillars of the Norman part, we can see traces of some medieval artwork which was uncovered. And the abbot is now taking the flock towards the east end. We'll be following them shortly. Firstly, let's have a look along the south side. Here's the newer part at the west end. And here's the part that collapsed and was rebuilt to match the newer part. We've now come down the nave to look at the screen behind the nave altar. Coloured statues perhaps seems very modern at first thought, but actually it's how they would have been in the old days. Right then, let's see where we are. We came all the way up the nave to that screen, and now we've come round here to look at the transepts. North transept, new window added in the 1880s. It's in this part of the building that we can see some of the oldest parts. I'm told that the pillars up there on the first floor are Saxon. As we have said, the church became the parish church after the Dissolution in the 16th century, but the town never seemed able to provide enough money for the maintenance. It probably wasn't in particularly good shape when they took it over. All valuables had been looted. Then came the Civil War with its usual despoliation. Then the Puritans damaged any ornamental work they could get at. They even smashed all the figures on this screen here. In other words, just the average experience of a church building in good old Christian England in the 16th to 18th centuries. As with so many similar buildings, the serene, well-cared-for structure which we see today gives little idea of the trials and tribulations it suffered during its history over recent centuries, a history it only just, on occasions, survived for us to appreciate today. There were major damaging storms in 1703 and 1799, further collapses, decaying roofs and leaning walls. The building was a ruin for decades and indeed narrowly escaped demolition. We've come through that doorway now into the north choir aisle. We can see here a 14th century clock which, among other things, rings the hours for the services in the Abbey, and the patched together remains of the shrine of St Amphibulus. Came the 19th century and things began to turn around, up to a point. In 1820, enough money was raised to buy a second-hand 1670 organ. After further bits of the building fell down, an architect, L.N. Cottingham, was appointed to conduct a survey. His report in 1832 estimated £14,000 was needed for essential repairs. About £4,000 was raised and the most urgent jobs were done. From the south choir aisle we've come through to see St Albans shrine. St Alban is reckoned to be the first English martyr. He was a young man living in the Roman town just down the hill. Like most people of the time, he was a pagan. The few Christians that there were faced persecution from the Romans. Alban gave shelter to one of these, an itinerant Christian priest called Amphibolus. We saw the shrine of Amphibolus a few moments ago. Alban became a Christian himself, and when the authorities came round to arrest the priest, Alban pretended to be him and was arrested. Alban openly professed his Christianity and was condemned to death. He was led to the top of the hill where the cathedral now stands and was executed. We're coming back down the nave now towards the west end. We spoke earlier about some repair work that had been carried out in the early 19th century. In 1856, efforts began again, possibly spurred by the aim of achieving cathedral status for the building. George Gilbert Scott was appointed as project architect, and various works were achieved until his death in 1878. After that, the upgrading project was commandeered by a chap called Lord Grimthorpe, who I presume was a local man, and as he was providing the funds, he had the control. In spite of not being in any way an architect, and having his work denigrated by the professionals. There was further controversy and aggravation when another local, recently ennobled person, Lord Aldenham, became involved. The whole saga is much too long and involved to cover here, but look at the website if you want more.